Okay, today we're doing distributive property. Distributive property is multiplying. When you see a number next to parentheses, that implies multiplication. It'd be like saying 5 times 4. When you see parentheses, that implies multiplication. And you have a number next to parentheses, so that's multiplication. Distributive property is multiplication. We are going to take this number out in front and multiply it to everything in the parentheses. Think of this like the parentheses is you have a group of kids, and this is out here. You're going to give this number to all the kids inside the group. You're going to give like 5 cookies to every kid sitting in the circle. Okay, but we're multiplying. I like to use these little arcs to remind me to take this 5 and multiply it to this one, and then this 5 and multiply it to the next one. Also with distributing, you have to watch your signs. Okay, this is an implied positive because there's no sign. That's an implied positive, so a positive times a positive is a positive. So 5 times x is 5x, and then 5 times a negative y, or that would be like a -1 in front. A positive times a negative is a negative, and then 5 times y would be 5y. When you have a number next to a letter, that implies multiplication. So that would be your answer for that, and you can't add x's to y, so you leave it just like that. Alright, now let's look at 12C3. Again, when you have a number in front of parentheses, that implies multiplication. You distribute. You're distributing this 3 to everything in that parentheses. When you distribute, you multiply numbers to numbers and letters to letters. So 3 times the 2, we multiply numbers together. 3 times the 2 would be 6q. You still have your letter, even though we're multiplying our numbers together, you still have the letter on there. And then 3 times a -4. The sign in front of the number goes with the number. So a +3 times a -4 is a -12. And you can't add letters to numbers, so you leave it just like that. Also, the one thing I want to point out, do you see how when you use distributive property, the parentheses go away? After you multiply this number to everything in the parentheses, your answer has no parentheses in it. Okay, let's look at 12D3. So again, we're going to take this q and we're going to multiply to everything in the parentheses. When you can do letters to letters, you multiply numbers to numbers and letters to letters. So you can multiply letters together. Q times x, the way that we write q times x is qx. When you see 2 letters next to each other, that implies multiplication. This means q times x, and we write it as qx. And then q times a +3, a positive q times a +3 is a positive. And q times 3, always write your numbers first. Don't write q3. You rarely see it as that. So instead, put your number first and then your letter. 3q means 3 times q. Okay, now looking at 12E1, watch your negatives. You have a -2 in front. A -2 times everything, so watch your signs. A -2 times a positive q. A negative times a positive is a negative, and 2 times q, 2q. Now a -2 times a +2r. You multiply your numbers together. Numbers to numbers and letters to letters. A negative times a positive is a negative. 2 times 2 is 4, and then you still have the r. And you can't add q's to r's. You can only add q's to q's, r's to r's, a's to a's, b's to b's. Now, we're going to work some problems where we're actually proving the distributive property. We're going to prove it by simplifying both sides. So, look at 12C16. So, we're going to simplify this side, and then we're also going to use the distributive property. Okay, so using the distributive property first, we're just going to prove how distributive property really does work. So take your 3 and multiply it to everything in the parentheses. 3 times x, we write it as 3x. 3 times a positive x is a positive, and again 3 times x, 3x. Now let's just work this side, doing the parentheses first. X plus x, that is an implied 1 in front and an implied 1 in front. So 1x plus 1x is 2x. Leave that in the parentheses. Your 3 goes out in front because that means 3 times that equals Now let's add these together. 3x plus 3x, 3 of these plus 3 of these is 6 of these. Now we can multiply this together. This means 3 times 2x. You multiply your numbers to numbers. 3 times 2 is 6, and you still have the x. And so we just proved that the distributive property really does work. On this side, we used distributed and got this answer. Over here, we added this, then multiplied to that. Okay, let's do the same thing again on 12C17. So we can do this side first. Do the parentheses first. 7 minus 2 is 5. And then times 9, 45. Okay, now we did all that first. And now let's prove the distribute, and we show that how distributing property really does work. So now let's distribute. 9 times 7 will be 63. 9 times a negative 2 would be a negative 18. And then 63 minus 18, if you go through all your math and you do your borrowing, then you will find out that 63 minus 18 is 45. So all we did is prove that distributing really is true and that you can distribute and get the same answer.